Okay, we'll get started. Welcome everyone to our webinar. I'm Maurice Moscovici. I am the founder and CEO of Metric Insights, and today I am delighted to be joined by Victor Gabriel Saiz Castillo, who is the Advanced Analytics Lead at Coca-Cola European Partners. And Victor, he's been in the BI space for over 15 years. He's actually co-written two separate books about reporting in German. And he's, in addition to having worked as a BI consultant for a few years in the Middle East, he now leads the BI platforms team at Coca-Cola European Partners. And he's somebody who's I think you're gonna find very interesting his perspectives, because he's somebody who was originally studied computational linguistics and economic science in Germany, and he has lots of interesting insights on computers and natural language. And today he's going to talk to you about how the Coca-Cola journey of implementing an AI-driven BI portal. So welcome, Victor. Thank you for joining us today. Um, So before we get started, before we have a Victor jump on and kind of present their journey, I wanted to first sort of set the stage by sharing a little bit with everyone on the webinar, kind of what BI portals are about, and I'm going to do that through the lens of Metric Insights, and how we think of it, how we think of the problem, and the solution that it's trying to solve. And I think that will sort of set the proper context so that when Victor goes in depth into what they've done, what motivated their journey, what they went through, and actually demos some of the capabilities that they developed, you'll kind of have an understanding of how that fits into the problem space. So with that, let's get started. So from our perspective at Metric Insights, we believe that BI in many ways is broken. And in most enterprises, despite sort of a very large investment that's being made in business intelligence and data governance, there are lots of problems out there. Most organizations have many different sources of BI, which is not necessarily a problem. I mean, it's just the nature of a distributed decision making that occurs in acquiring tools, but it is can be overwhelming for users, and that they have to consume content across so many different places. Each of them has its own governance paradigm, so that's a challenge. And there's oftentimes challenges when you're looking at consumption, when you look at of a particular community that has a business tool, BI tool. Oftentimes, when you look at actual consumption across that, it's just not where it ought to be. A far lower percentage in most organizations of the people that should be using BI tools are actually using them on a day-to-day basis in making decisions. And similarly, when you look at the reporting catalogs that have been created, if all the different reports that have been built across all the different tools that organizations have, there's a fundamental challenge in that they're just a low percentage of those reports are actively used, which is fairly strong indicator that people are not connected to the right analytics, and lots of wasted effort is going into building reports that are not actually generating value to the business. And then there's a lot of time spent in every organization where people are just searching for information, trying to figure out, what is the trusted source where I can get an answer to this particular business question. And that's a big challenge, and that's fundamentally what BI is there to solve. And if you ask most users, well, can you easily find the information you need to be able to answer your question? Most people will give you a resounding no to that. So these are all challenges, and this sort of motivates the BI portal or catalog space. And if you think about the consumption journey, put yourself kind of in the shoes of somebody who's going to be doing consuming reporting. This is what it typically looks like, right? You've got all these different sources. You might have Tableau or Power BI or SQL Server or other sources. Some things are in SharePoint. Some things are on file systems, and you as the end user are left to kind of your own initiative to try to figure out where do you need to get things. You collect bookmarks by talking to people, and try over time, as you do a particular function, you gradually understand like what are the reports that I need to use and to do my job. And as somebody coming into new function, it's incredibly time consuming to figure that out, and oftentimes time is wasted by users doing that. And governance is a challenge. And ultimately, what I think all of us want in all of our organizations is to have something that's much more centralized and well governed, right? So the idea is that you want a state of BI where there's a central place where people come to access that information, irrespective of what that delivery mechanism is for the information, whether it's a Power BI or a Tableau or SharePoint or what have you. And all of it is searchable, all of it is governed. As a user, I'm only getting the things that are actually meaningful. I'm not running into duplicative content, and that creates sort of a user experience that is much more compelling and engaging for the user base. So that's really what BI portals or BI catalogs are all about, right? So as you think about, well, how does one of these things get created? What are the steps in that? Uh, First of all, of course, you have to connect to all of the sources in the ecosystem what all the BI tools, all the SaaS tools, everything that's there. So there has to be kind of some kind of plugin infrastructure to connect to those sources. Then the next step, you have to do some BI ops, what we call BI ops, which is go through. You don't want to necessarily bring in every single report, so you need to go through the catalog of reports that are there, identify what you want to keep, what's duplicative, what's obsolete. We filter all those things out. Oftentimes, there needs to be an integration with the data catalog where you might have valuable metadata. You might want to surface to users, whether they are consuming PII data when they're looking at a report, or data classification associated with the report, or certification information. A lot of times that information is in a data catalog. So you want to be able to marry that information from the data catalog with like metadata you've gotten from your BI tools, filter out the stuff you don't want to use, eliminate duplicative content, and then publish into a catalog, right? So now you've got a governed space where users can come in and in a centralized fashion search for all their content and have that access, of course, for content governed through your central Active Directory system or LDAP system, right? So the idea is you don't want to users might want to be able to see a report and discover that it exists and request access to it. So there's certainly that kind of capability that's important, but they ought not be able to enter a report that they shouldn't have access to. And then there are, of course, some reports that you may want to keep completely hidden and confidential only for the people that have access to it. But one centralized place to govern all that is very critical. And then once you've got that, then you can look at consumption models. So, Victor's going to show you in a bit, AI as a consumption model is very important from a discovery perspective. People are increasingly expecting to be able to search for things using natural language and to find that content in an intelligent way. That way, be able to access that information in Teams or Slack or other tools, as well as through traditional, desktop, mobile, email, having things distributed via email. All those things are key modalities that should be present for any kind of a centralized portal solution, so that you can, as a user, you can consume that content that you want to use, irrespective of source, in the same way, across all the touch points where you might want to be, where you're asking for the information. So this is a high level sort of architecture of how one goes about putting together this kind of a solution. And then to give you a sense, a little bit of generically of what's included in the solution, I'll just sort of speak to a few of these slides, and then we'll sort of jump into Victor's presentation, where he can show you what it really means in real life and at the Coca-Cola implementation. Here, this is sort of might be the BI ops stage, where you would be flagging, identifying the potential duplicates that are there. So, here you're seeing a list of reports. For each report, you've designated main reports and potential duplicate reports. You may be comparing on the right-hand side the metadata across the different reports. In this case, 2 Tableau reports, and you can see that there's overlapping columns between those reports is very significant. You might be deciding to deprecate that report, some reports, promote others, and so forth, and so on and so forth, and looking at usage and identifying unused reports as well. All is part of the journey of cleaning up the catalog, so that you have within each of BI tools so that you only promote the things to the portal that you actually want users to consume. And this is, of course, something that isn't a one-time one and done type of process. In any kind of a well-managed, well-governed environment, you're going to have a continuous process whereby you are, as new reports are created, you're identifying and promoting those things to the portal. If they're worthy, you're flagging duplicates, if hopefully very early in the process as they're getting developed, to avoid wasted effort in duplicate report creation and so forth. Once you've got your reports published to the BI catalog, you then have a one place where you can access everything. So here you see kind of a snapshot of what the generic sort of metric insights catalog looks like. On the left-hand side, you've got folders and categories for content, and then in the center, you have a tile representation where every single visualization or report that you have access to is shown in its own tile with an image. And that can be you can see here in this example, Click, Tableau, Power BI, whatever you might have, all accessible in a single interface with filtered and so forth. If you click on one of those items, you get to see a preview of that content with a larger image, and then you also get to see some metadata here on the right-hand side, where you know that it's been certified. You can see what enterprise KPIs are associated with that object, and in this particular screenshot, you can see if I click on one of those enterprise KPIs, I can see the definitions of those KPIs, so that I have glossary terms that tell me what does cost mean, what does sales mean, what does this particular term mean, so that I understand how to interpret the information. And then further down, you can see maybe you've brought in some information from Calibra or Elation or any of your BI, any of your data catalogs around maybe data sensitivity, or does the report use data that contains PII data, things of that nature that you might be maintaining in those systems. Again, to let the user know how they should be using the information to make sure that they're not, if there's restricted content, well, they shouldn't forward it within the organization. If it's a just sensitive information, well, and they should be, if a PI data, obviously don't download the information, and be very careful about how to use it. So all of that is sort of presented to you before you get into the content. And then once you get into the content, the idea is that you should be able to obviously consume it natively without leaving the catalog experience, because you want people to not have to worry or think about what report tool is being used. It should be the same experience irrespective of tool. And then in this example, see here, you can see that at the top of this dashboard, there's even a little banner, an announcement. So you want to be able to do things like integrate with alerts, sync systems that you have, data quality checks, things of that nature. So you can tell users that when there's an issue, that, hey, in this example, that there's a problem with the data pipelining today. Data's not available yet. It'll be resolved. So having those kinds of announcements or communication to users, or alerts, if you like, around data quality or data availability is very important in any kind of governed delivery of analytics, because users then know whether they can trust the data they're looking at, or whether there's some kind of issue that's being worked, and they should come back later. So that kind of broad-based communication is vitally important. So in addition to actually consuming the content, obviously finding it is very important, right? So there should be capabilities for search. And here you see a few different modalities of that. I might be on my mobile. I should be able to search for the content there and consume it there through a portal experience there. On the right-hand side there, you've got, I think that's either Slack or Teams, and you should be able to, obviously do the consumption there. If you want to be able to, in your Teams communication, you want to just ask a bot there about your content and find it. That should be possible. And then if you're at the desktop and you want to use more of a traditional sort of Google style search control, that should be possible as well. So that's just finding the data irrespective of where you are, and interacting with it the same way is very important. And that's a key capability of any portal. And then beyond that, the ability for enabling discoverability is key as well. So if you think about it, in most organizations, one of the key challenges is that users are not necessarily aware of those reports that exist, that they don't have access to. Maybe they weren't part of the AD group that was given access to that report originally, which is probably was originally a good security practice. But one of the problems is that as a user, they don't know that it exists, so they don't know that they should ask for it. And when they're trying to solve a problem because they don't find it, then they go to some other user, some business analyst, and say, hey, can you create this for me? A duplicate report is generated, and lots of wasted effort is created, and over time, then you have a whole bunch of duplicates built up in the system. So the ability for users to be able to discover that content is there, that they don't have access to, and then request access to it is vitally important. And you see an example of that here. I found this particular thing maybe in searching for procurement. I found this dashboard, and I don't actually see the dashboard. There's a lock on it. There's a fuzzy image. I can't actually see the data, but I do see the metadata around it that tells me, who created it, what some of the key enterprise KPIs that it measures, and then I have the ability to click to request access, which then puts me into maybe a ServiceNow flow or some other workflow within the organization, where then the right party is notified that, hey, I'm requesting access to this, and then they can decide whether it's appropriate for me to get access and give it to me or not. So that's that, and you'll see this in action as well when Victor does his presentation. The idea is that we also, you should also have some kind of a LLM or what we call concierge for in our application, access to the information. Increasingly, all of our users are expecting to have natural language interfaces to things. The consumer space is moving in that direction, and so I think that's going to be expected with analytics as well. Is that I don't necessarily need to put a complex search expression into something, or have a hard learn how to do a filtering interface. I should just be able to ask for something and find and have an intelligence system locate the right content for me based on based on usage, based on relevance and based on it understanding the question that's being asked. So, and then I guess the final piece I'll mention before we kind of switch over to Victor's presentation. It's important to be able to deliver a customized user experience to users. So, once you've got things in a portal, that's as a catalog, that's great, but ultimately the ability to be able to get value out of that also hinges on having a persona optimized experience where users are going to be driven to value as quickly as possible. So in this is one example where what we've done here is we've bubbled up some of the key KPIs from many different visualizations. So you can imagine for a moment, maybe I'm a user that cares about all these different metrics across 4 different categories. There are, I think, something like 20 metrics on this page. I probably don't have time every day to look at 20 different dashboards if each of these things is tied to one dashboard, but I could probably have enough time to quickly peruse this and see how my KPIs are performing, see what's in the red or what's trending or increasing. And then when something catches my eye here that it is actually trending out of band, then click into it, and then it will take me to the dashboard where I can do a deep dive and understand more about it. And you can see that same experience available there, and that's in that screenshot on the right with a mobile device. So again, great to have published content, but make it accessible both through search, discoverability, and through custom experiences that users can then engage with to get the value as quickly as possible with a very limited amount of time that most business users in an organization have to spend on analytics. Okay. I guess I had one more. So I had one more thing. I just said it one more thing, but I'll tell one more thing. And we talked about governance for a moment, right? And so part of that is the publishing process. And one of the things to think about is that it's often important to be able to have a mechanism by which you can go and publish content through a workflow. So here you're seeing a workflow where this is complex workflow with multiple stages, but it's possible to do it with fewer stages as well. The idea being that as there's a new report, maybe you've done that BI ops stage that we looked at before, where you identify the duplicates. Now you promoted it into a workflow here, where then it can be enriched with metadata, additional descriptions can be included. Maybe there's a review process for some like the multi-stage review process if it's something very sensitive like a board report or a financial report that's going to the executive committee when multiple hands are looking at a data governance team, the business analyst, etc., and then it gets certified at the end of that process. So having kind of a Kanban multi-stage process where it makes it easy to get promoted, but with a proper governance is important as well. And then engagement and utilization, all that stuff is important to analyze as well. Okay, so with that, let me stop and stop my sharing. I'll put and Victor can talk to you and show you a little bit about their journey, and you can understand a little of how this works in real life.
Thank you so much, Marius. Great pleasure to be here today. I hope you will find this interesting, and then hopefully to some of you, this will be very interesting, or maybe even inspiring when you think about the analytics portal and how that can be implemented in your organization. So, first of all, who is Coca-Cola EuroPacific Partners? I have a little bit of a marketing video in here as a very short one. I'm going to play in three, two, one. So I'm going to leave it there for the marketing video. The reason why I'm showing this to you is to show you our journey, who we are, and why do we have a huge need for an analytics portal, and how we actually implemented it. So that was who CCP is, and then a little bit the history in here. So we started many years ago bottling Coca-Cola. We are a different company than the Coca-Cola company, which is the, let's say, the company that sells the syrup to the bottlers. So you can think of this as a kind of like a franchise system. So we're the biggest bottler in the world. And because of this, we have merged quite a lot in the history. So, for example, in Germany in the late 90s, we had dozens and dozens of bottlers, and even in the early 20s, we had more of a dozen of bottlers. As you can imagine, with these mergers, we get different BI systems, we get different technologies, we get different reports, and we also get, at the end of the day, a little bit more difficulty of accessing those reports. And I imagine some of you will also relate to these mergers and acquisitions. This brings us to a huge BI challenge, finding reports, especially. Um, there is an interesting study which McKinsey conducted some time ago, which was that employees spend 2 hours a day just searching for information. This is quite a lot of information, so this process is not very efficient. In my organization, we have thousands of employees, we have thousands of reports in different technologies, mainly in Power BI, in Tableau. So what happens is when a company has access to a report, they save that link in their browser, or they receive the link to those reports via email. Or there's also sometimes, I call it group pockets of group reports just with list of links to reports. Obviously, that's not very scalable. So at this stage, there is no way to discover new reports. So if you don't know that a report exists, then the chance that that will result in a report duplication is huge there. And even if you get a URL to an existing report, if you just get an error message saying you don't have access, then you didn't win a lot with that. You still need to find a person that explains to you how to request access to that specific report. And this is why an analytics catalog can serve as a great one-stop shop for not only accessing, but also searching, discovering, and also requesting permissions to reports. And you're going to see a demo of the different features in a minute. How did we arrive to implementing the analytics portal? We first tried to build this in house. We actually had some SharePoint programmers try to build this in SharePoint. It actually works, so it's not very scalable, but you have somewhere a list of links to reports. But if you think about big companies and about scalability, then it's actually not a very good solution. Of course, you can implement even in a PDF. It's just very hard to maintain that, to transfer to people. It's just not a very good solution. So we are now in year one of the implementation of the analytics catalog. Has been a success so far. And I have bits and pieces here of videos where you will see actually our implementation. It's just a little bit anonymized, so don't mind if it's something blurred. That is actually a real system. So in the first video that I'm going to show you about our implementation, you're going to see how do we search for reports and how do we access those reports. So in this example, we're easily searching for reports using a quick search, where you just type in anything, and with anything I mean not only the title of the report, but also the business description that you have curated in the system, or even KPIs or anything related to that metadata of the report. So when you say search for reports and finding for reports, there's different levels of complexity and different levels of quality in here. So when you search for this, you're actually searching a broad metadata which is created in the system. You can also search for KPIs. So in this example, we're selecting one KPI, and then the system is bringing all of the reports with that specific KPI, which is also useful when you don't know how the report is called, but that the report contains a specific KPI. And then opening a report is very straightforward. Apologies, I just hit next on that one. And opening reports is very straightforward. It's just clicking on the thumbnail, and then the report will open embedded in the portal, showing that metadata, the certification status that Marius was mentioning before, and in our example, KPIs. I don't have this here in this video, but when you click on the KPIs, you actually see the definitions of that KPI. And in the links related to that report, you will also find links to our data catalog, where we have more information about that KPI. So that was the video number one. And then in the video number two, we're changing the paradigm from search and find to discover. So this is where you don't necessarily have already access to that report, but when you're entering a discoverability mode, where you're searching for something where you don't have access to yet. So I'm going to play the video now. On the top of the portal, then you will see that there is a sentence saying there is some more reports where you can show them. Just let me pause here. So here it says show them. If you click on there, then you're switching from only viewing thumbnails of reports where you already have access, which is also good because you don't want to overload people. But when you want to access this discoverability mode, you just click on that show reports over there, and that will make the reports appear where you don't have access. If you click on any of those thumbnails, which is clearly mentioned that you don't have access to yet, then you will see metadata of the report. This helps the people understand if this is the report where they want to request access. So we expose metadata of the report, we expose KPIs, we also expose who to contact. In this case, is blurred, but you can imagine in our organizations, so obviously not blurred. And we also offer other information about this report. Even how to request access to reports in general. And then the last point, and then the most important piece for me personally, is a direct link to request access to that report. In this case, we have an integration with our identity management system, which is SailPoint. So in this case, when you click on that direct link, then you will be very easily to request access because the needed role is already pre-selected for you. So you only need to hit next, and then hopefully, not shown in this video, but hopefully adding a request or a reasoning behind that request. Why would you like to have access to this report? Um, then we come to the conversational AI assistant of the solution. This is a part of the portal. We implemented a page in Metric Insights. This is called a portal page that allows not only to search for reports, but it also allows you to ask for KPI definitions, and it also allows you to access information which is related to BI. Like, for example, who needs a BI license for Tool 1 or Tool B, or what is the process to get a new report created, or anything on those likes. And this is the absolutely value added of an LLM. So an LLM can not only help users find reports in a more natural way, which is using natural language, but also adds information on that. I also have a video of this feature here. Let me hit on the play button. In this case, we have pre-selected questions. This is something that you can personalize. So if the finance department access to this page, then you can have example of the most frequently asked questions in the finance department, and the most important links of the finance department, for example. And in this case, I'm now hitting the define the production volume KPI. I'm just clicking on the example question here, but obviously you can type it in as well. And when you're clicking on that, then the LLM is giving that information. If I may pause here for a second, I ask for one KPI definition, and then the system, this is blurred, but bear with me. But the system is actually giving me the descriptions of three different KPIs, because the system recognized the semantic similarity between the metric that I was asking for and two other metrics in the system. So it gave me a generic answer, which is that something that ChatGPT would give you. It's answering in the context of my organization with links to our data catalog, where you can find more information about this report. So absolutely value added in comparison to searching for a KPI. That was one example, and then the other example is obviously you can also use it to search for reports using natural language. So in here you just type in search for a keyword, and then the system will give you back the reports with reports thumbnails, and also with a description of the report, some metadata of it, to allow you to see if this is the report what you're looking for. If you don't have access to the report, then it will bring that page where you can access for request to that report. One very important thing, which I truly believe, is in future we're going to see more and more LLMs embedded into more and more applications. And what we should not allow to happen is that each application contains a different knowledge set to that LLM. So the way to tackle that is basically to share the knowledge of those LLMs together, and that is done in Azure. We use Azure. In Azure, it's called a search index, and with that, you can just tap into that index, and with that index, you can grab information from a whole different set of sources. So you could add here, and I was just talking about an example before from a project that you have in your organization, a very big one. So you will be able to chat with your LLM about the project. What is the project about? Who is involved in the project? And so on and so forth. Most important watch out that we found in our implementation, and this is not specifically for the portal implementation, but in general. But we also found it was the most important one to watch out for the portal implementation: generative artificial intelligence hallucinations. So sometimes the system can tell you something which is not necessarily true. So the way that we tackle, and then the way that we make it really transparent for users is first, just in the start page, as any AI, this might generate incorrect information from time to time. And also in the answers that you get from that LLM, you can do this with custom instructions in also many other systems, is basically mentioning where is this information coming from. So if you're asking about KPI, it is really important to know Is it based on general knowledge that ChatGPT can give you, or is it based on my organizational knowledge that I added to this LLM using an index behind the scenes? And as a last slide I have here with me today is a summary slide of the most important topics, so to say, that I find when we implemented the portal. So the first one is a portal should be able to give easily access to reports to your employees. And this is the most, let's say, basic one, the most easy one to achieve. You click on a thumbnail, you open a report, and then hopefully that it's embedded, because you don't want to lose that user. You want him to keep in the technology as much as you can, so that he can also enjoy from other reports as well, related reports. Finding reports, this one sounds easy, but it's actually more complex behind the scenes, because what you definitely need is a good set of metadata curated to that report. So you can embed into that report things like business routines, like metrics, like target audience persona, so that when people are searching for that, that actually they're going to come back, or the system will come back with the reports related to that. Next one is the discoverability of reports. This one is at the end of the day also very important to avoid things like report duplication, which Marius was mentioning before. So it is important that those reports are made discoverable. Obviously, you don't want everything to be discoverable, but most of the content you do want to have discoverable in your system. And also key here is a good integration with your identity management system, with that ServiceNow, or in our case with SailPoint, where it's just a three-click process from discovering that report to actually requesting access to that report. Then the next one, the right reports for the right audience. I saw it in the video before. I didn't mention it in the video before. I'm mentioning this now. This is very, very important. Our users, when they access the catalog, they just don't get a huge list of reports. They get the list of reports which are more relevant to them. And we do this on a combination of business function and country. So if I am from the commercial organization in Germany, then I see always in the top the most used report in the commercial organization for Germany. This is something that we curate behind the scenes, which works very nice, because basically you can send one link to the portal to any user, and he will actually already see on the top left the most important report for him. So this is a customized experience. We can also use the portal to access metric definitions. This was the example with Concierge and with the LLM, where you can ask questions about metrics. And this we do with an integration with our data catalog, where we have this information. And then the last point is to tap not only into reports, existing reports, and discovering reports, but also into surrounding BI processes. Like, do I need a license for accessing X report, or how do I get a report created in my organization? How to contact the BI team? Anything related on those likes, so that for your users is when they think about reports, they just go to the portal, they will find the information they need, even if this is not a specific report. And this is basically the presentation that I wanted to share with you. Now, yeah, Marius, let's
Yeah.
open the floor. Do you have any
Th-
questions?
Thank you, Victor. So if you haven't, anyone has questions, please drop it into the Q&A area. I was going to ask Victor a few questions, and then we'll pick up questions that are in the Q&A area. So Victor, you talked about and you showed, I think, the whole how people can access in through the portal. They're accessing those reports and they're enriched with metadata from your data catalog. There's additional documentation in there that you've added, KPI definitions have been associated, etc. Can you describe a little bit, like, because I'm sure the audience must be thinking, well, obviously there's some effort required to do that, to publish the content. What's involved in that? How do you kind of make sure that the right content gets in? How are you making sure that you've got the right level of standardized and a coherent amount of metadata associated with that, from a process perspective in the organization?
In our organization, we have a defined set of report curators. This is specifically trained people that are allowed to upload reports to the portal. And they got a training where they actually know what kind of data, metadata to add. And what we do once in a month is we take a look at the usage statistics of the source systems, and that way we're able to identify reports which might not be in the portal just yet because maybe they're new, for example. We also take care that the reports that we add are not with a very low usage. So we prioritize reports across usage. And we also take a look if the reports are departmental or enterprise reports. And then obviously the enterprise reports, they get a certification mark so that people are very aware that this is enterprise reports created by the BI team. So the quality is for sure very high. But we're also then open to the idea of adding departmental reports if they're widely used because people are using it. That this is at the end what the portal is doing is helping people find reports. We also upload those without the tick mark for certification status. Then you can do things like filtering of that certification status, for example. Does that answer your question, Marius?
I think so. Yeah, thank you. That's a very, very good question. I'm also curious, just from an organizational perspective, for those folks that are thinking about, hey, I want to be able to implement something like this in my organization. Um, what have you found to be the challenges in terms of getting buy-in to this approach? Because obviously this is a governed environment, and if you start, presumably you're starting with something that isn't as governed. Have you found it challenging to transition the organization from a less governed to a more governed environment? Do you have any tips or advice for anyone who's sort of taking on this kind of journey?
So what we did is that we started with the most control, with the least amount of curators, how we call the people that add reports to the portal, and we're very very slowly expanding, making that a little bit widely accessible. But on the other side, we will not end up completely adding because you always need this at least level of training where you, for example, take care about the metadata and about how to add those reports. So if you really want to make it standardized, then that list of individuals cannot be very very huge. But what we do is that we have different groups for the different business functions, so they're already very aware about which kind of reports do we have and contacts and which contact person to go to and so on and so forth. But yeah, I would definitely say start small with a control group and then slowly expand so that you start or that you're able to control that standardization of the portal and then that you don't lose control too fast.
And Victor, in your environment, is it a push or a pull model? In other words, is it something that for these groups that are going on board, it's mandated that they be able to put things in the governance space, or are you taking the approach where you're promoting it to those teams and saying, look, here's the value add, and more like pulling them in that way voluntarily into this process?
Very, very interesting question. So for the most important reports, for the reports that we know that are heavily, heavily used, we first upload into the catalog, and then we follow up with the corresponding people to make sure that it has the right level of metadata, for example, and to double check on things like if the report can be discoverable or not, or things like that. But we do that only for the most important content. For the rest, we do it together with the adoption in the market and in the business function so that the users also see value added. And most of the users, when I have this conversation with them, they're actually very happy. They're actually pushing to have their reports as soon as possible in the portal.
Great. Thank you. I see we have some questions, so let's go to some of the audience questions. So there's a question here about from Joseph about can we know how this technology is implemented? I'm not sure, Joseph, if the question is about the entire stack or the specific area. So let me just answer kind of generically, and if you can maybe follow up if there's specifically which is something you're looking for. That this is deployed. The metric insight solution itself can be deployed into the cloud. Oh, it looks like you just said LLM assistant. Okay, so the LLM assistant technology, that is, so the way that works is that we integrate with a LLM. And so when you set up Metric Insights, you configure it to indicate if you want LLM integration, it's optional. But if you want to do that, you can configure it and connect it to basically any sort of top-end LLM that you want to use. It can be OpenAI through Azure. It can be just directly to OpenAI. It can be Anthropic, Google, etc. It can be something in your on-premise that you have, or that you're getting through Amazon AWS. So as long as it's a capable LLM. And then the way that the architecture works is we don't actually ever pass data to that LLM. We're basically just using the LLM to figure out, what is the nature of the question. So in other words, is the user asking, as you saw for Victor, in Victor's example, are they looking for content? Are they looking for a definition of something? Are they looking for an understanding of how to do something? And based on that, then the LLM determines which tool should be called, right? So for the case of search, it's just formulating, here's how I'm going to formulate my search question, and that search gets initiated locally with a metric insight. So that doesn't, the data about metadata about that report, et cetera, doesn't actually go to the LLM. In that case, it's just executed. And then if it's a frequently asked question, again, we've got that can either go against the data set that's in Metric Insights, or if you're using something like an Azure index, like what Victor mentioned a moment ago, then we are passing that question to Azure index, and then the LLM does have the access to that, whatever you've registered to that Azure index. So as Victor mentioned, strategically, or if you think about architecturally, what we want to get, what we feel is important is not to have sort of this federated model where you've got 100 bots for 100 different things. You've got to remember where to go to. We want to be able to make it possible for you to have a single bot where you can ask all your questions, and then things get delegated out to other bots. So the Metric Insights architecture allows you to do that delegation in two different directions. You can either register additional resources, like this Azure index is an example, right, where you've got other resources, and then you delegate that request to those resources, and then you get the response and bring it back, or you can have the RBot delegated itself from someplace else. So if you've got some kind of corporate bot that supports many different questions, including BI questions, then you can route just the BI related questions to our concierge, get the responses, and deliver it that way. But the idea being you create an ecosystem where there is hopefully one place where people can get their information, whether it's through our portal or through someplace else where you've embedded this capability. Okay, so Kirsten asks this question. I think this is for you, Victor. How long did your implementation take? How many reports do you have approximately?
So how many do we have in the source systems? Way too many. A couple of thousands, dozens of thousands. How many do we have in the actual portal? We would have around 300 to 400 reports. And we actually did a study to find out what should be the amount of reports that we get into it. And what we thought is our goal is to have at least 80% of users thinking about those reports. They should be able to find those reports in the portal. And that doesn't mean that we should add 80% of the reports. This would be way too much. But taking a look at for example, the amount of clicks or the amount of different users, 80% of that activity, we want it to be in the portal, so that the portal becomes at some point in time the single point of access, or let's say the main point of access where people are happy finding those reports. And that study gave us this number, 300 to 400 reports, because we have actually a large implementation and different technologies. We have both Tableau and Power BI, and both more than a dozen thousands of reports.
And Victor, can you describe a little bit of what your implementation involved, kind of how you organized it, the amount of time it took? I think they want to get a sense of how long does it take to get something like this off the ground. You mentioned that you started, small and then increased scope, but maybe can you add a little bit of color to that for Kristen?
So let's say we took some time to definitely think about what do we want as an analytics portal, because definitely, or one way to failure would be just take anything that is out there without thinking what do you actually need, what does your organization need. So we took some time to figure that out. What do we need to do an actual test with users, where we got a friendly group, we onboarded them, and we showed them this is what we could have, is this the right way to go, what to do. This took, let's say, more than half a year, I would say. And then the implementation side of things, I would say this took us also another 6 months, more or less. The actual adding of a report doesn't take a long time, but then the actual finding those report curators in your organization, adding those processes, um, also adoption. So bringing this to the user, this also takes some time. So, and if I may spend one minute here, also one way to failure would be just to add some reports and send one email to everyone in your organizations saying, here's the portal. So we also took some time into taking a look into how to bring this into the specific markets and into the specific countries. So our role, or wave-based rollout approach, included doing into each and every business function a different set of communications, which was tailored for the audience, so that it's relevant for them. So yeah, overall, I would say between selecting or thinking about what do we need until an implementation, I would say something on the likes of 1 year.
Yeah, and I think that one thing to think about is it's really what I mean, we see this in general as a principle, whether an organization takes a year or it takes 6 months or 3 months to roll out, it's always the case that what Victor said is always true, which is that um, it is the amount most of the time is spent really thinking and carefully considering what gets added, and making sure it's the right relevant content for the audience, and then working with the audience that's going to consume it to make sure that you've created an experience that's compelling to them and socializing into them, etc. And doing that sort of start small and build up is the right model, because that allows you to learn rather than spending 9 months and then don't do anything. If you can get something out in 3 months or whatever, and I know, Victor, you guys did some early releases, soft launches and things like that, and then get feedback, then that really informs that bigger launch you're going to do, based on the feedback that you get from the smaller communities. So I think it's very important. Swati has a question here. How have you set up your security access for viewers of content so that kind of one person can't see the data from that's responsible for another side? And then I guess maybe related to it, this is maybe worth considering, is maybe I answer the question about how do you manage sort of master data management across so many countries?
So about
So
the
security on the reporting, and then master data management are the two questions.
so security on the reports is basically, this is coming from the source system. So if you have, let's say, Power BI, then you do your role level security in Power BI directly, and you also give access to the users using groups. In our example, or in our implementation, we use Active Directory, and then we have an identity management system, so SailPoint, managing the users in that Active Directory group for requesting access. And what we do is we just take the same Active Directory in any system that this report is appearing. So with this prerequisite, then it's completely transparent. Then it's basically you take the same group, and then it's rolled over anywhere. And then you have also this, if you remember, in the portal, there was this show me reports where I don't have access. That also comes down to that. And we also have automatic groups for business functions and countries, and this help us also promote the right content to the right audience as well. And then the question about metadata, I'm taking the educated guess that question is about report metadata, which was a lot more difficult actually to get into the system, because in many cases we didn't have any. So we actually had to find out. What we did is we have an example of what success looks like for a report with perfect metadata, and we train the reports curated on this perfect state. And then the responsible, whenever they get a request, we actually have this also in the request. We have a form when you want to add a report to the platform, and in that form, we already ask some key questions about the metadata of the report, so that it's easier to get. But basically, the curators are key here to get that metadata into the portal.
Okay, thank you, Victor. So with that, I think we're going to wrap up. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Victor, thank you so much for sharing so generously about with everyone. So your experience and the details of what all the great details about what how you implemented, what you implemented, the challenges, as well as the learnings that you took away. I think there's a lot for everyone, whether you use metric insights or any other technology. If you're implementing portals, I think there's a lot here that you can take away and move forward with. So thank you, everyone.